Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode here at the Sobriety University podcast. Really excited for this one today. We have my good friend and brother, Ricky Goodall. Welcome to the channel, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joel. I'm excited for this.
Welcome. So, for you guys that don't know, Ricky and I, we met through Sober Living Coaching. He reached out, he was looking to quit marijuana, and he did just that. And so, today is going to be a little bit about your journey and how you quit weed, what some of the trials, tribulations, and then this very interesting thing you share with me called high magic, which is ironic for this topic. So, Ricky, why don't we start with who you are and what got you into marijuana? Where did your journey begin?
Yeah, so I like to introduce myself by saying my name is Ricky Goodall, but that's not really who I am. That's just an identity or a character that I created at birth so I could be loved and accepted by the people around me. And I continue to create that identity since birth. And I started to believe that that's really who I am. All the beliefs, all the perspectives, all the opinions, all the accomplishments and the achievements and the failures and the successes. And I associated all of those with this character I've created. And I've learned throughout my life that that's not really who I am. I'm something more than that. I'm something more than this character. And so as part of my character, I became a mixed martial arts fighter in 2006. And I went through 21 MMA fights in my fighting career. I went from being jobless and homeless to kind of manifesting a fighting career. And then within 6 years, I was fighting for pay-per-view television, for world championships in front of thousands of fans. And as my career started to take off, I started to get into heavy drugs and alcohol, drugs like cocaine and ecstasy and MDMA and alcohol. And I was just chasing that fast pace, fast high, whatever, getting high in whatever way I can. So in 2015, I was initiated into ceremonial high magic, which we're going to talk about soon. And I walked away from alcohol and heavy drugs, but I found it difficult to find some way to maintain that high that I used to get from martial arts and mixed martial arts and from drugs. So I went to cannabis. And cannabis almost became this supplement to this mixed martial arts party lifestyle. And I was really grateful for it for a while. So you and I have talked about it. It's like, it's great until it's not great anymore. Yeah. And it was great for a while. And I'm really grateful for it because it was this landing pad or this like way of getting off of these heavier, more intense lifestyle habits. But then eventually it just became an issue.
Yeah, man. Sports can be really powerful for getting that high. I know that it's funny because that's exactly why I got into marijuana too, is because I was getting so much validation and recognition from sports in high school. And then that ended and I was like, who am I? Who am I without these sports? Who am I without this, those endorphins going crazy every single day? Mm-hmm. So yeah, you started smoking and what kind of transcended from there? Like,
actually, let me backtrack. When I was in my fighting career, I started smoking cannabis with a girlfriend. And at that time, I'd used cannabis before that. I'd used it when I was a teenager. I used it in another relationship, but I didn't have as much fun with it as her and I did. So we would smoke cannabis. We would eat a shit ton of junk food. She was a fitness model. I was an MMA fighter. I was an athlete. Food, we just went crazy with it. And cannabis was this way of making junk food even more intense and, accentuated the flavors. And so her and I kind of went from there. And so I sort of associated using cannabis not only with this feeling of being high, but also this feeling of connection. And I learned that THC and cannabis kind of mimics in the nervous system, it mimics the feeling of being connected to somebody, even when I'm not. And the challenge with it is, since I'm not actually getting my needs met, I'm still kind of empty, even though the cannabis is creating this supplementary experience of being connected.
Yeah, man, it's interesting you say that. Like for me, it was the same, like very similar, where it does raise your vibration a bit at the beginning. It does tap you into a different level of consciousness. However, as we talked, like that doesn't last forever, and as you can tell, it didn't. So, yeah, continue on with.
Yeah, I love the title of the video because it's almost like a play on words. I don't know if you did this on purpose, but the last time I got high was why I quit cannabis. And so in the title, you say, how getting high helped Ricky quit cannabis. And it was actually because the last time I got high, which I told you this story, you and I had been working together for almost 2 weeks at that point. And we were on a plan to help me cut down slowly. And then eventually you said, you're going to have to go to cold turkey at some point, but it's better to wean off slowly. And what's that? What do you call that?
Slow and steady. Yep.
Slow and steady. Yeah, exactly. So it's just kind of like coming off of it. And so a friend had a bong And I have very little experience with a bong. And he gave it to me and he gave me the weed and he said, just go ahead and help yourself. And so I didn't really know how much to put in the bowl or whatever you call it. And so I took a hit on this bong and I got higher than I've ever been in my whole life. And I was like so high that I was afraid to be alone. I didn't want this guy to leave. I was like, will you stay with me? I was renting his Airbnb and I was like I was clinging on it. I was like, please don't leave. And so I was like, at one point I was getting dizzy and I needed to get some fresh air. So we went outside and I was leaning against my car. And the next thing I know, I woke up on the ground. I cut my knee open. I literally passed out well high on weed and I hit a bunch of gravel. So I literally hit rock bottom. It's like, it was crazy. And the interesting thing is while I was passed out, I had this like vision, I guess I might call it, or this experience where God was talking to me and saying, if you keep using cannabis, I'm going to take everything from you. Mm-hmm. And while I was in this experience, I lost everything because I lost my consciousness. So I'd lost everything. And so I had this realization like, wow, it's time to let this go. Mm-hmm. And then from that point forward, I had to get up 6 hours later for a flight to here in Mexico, my home. And I couldn't sleep all night because I was so high and I barely slept. And then I traveled all day long and I was just exhausted the whole day of traveling. And it was the experience I think I needed. Mm-hmm. And I sometimes say that, the universe kind of first throws a pebble at me. And if I don't get the hint, it throws a rock at me. Then it throws a brick and then it throws a boulder. And I don't know if that was the boulder, but it was definitely felt like a brick because it hit me hard. It was embarrassing. This guy was a kind of a friend, but also kind of a client too. So it was like kind of a friend and client. And I literally passed out in front of it. I've never passed out with weed before. So I looked it up afterwards and, heard that it can happen. Our blood pressure drops and then we just kind of pass out. But it was embarrassing because this guy's like, he's shaking me and he's saying, Ricky, you passed out, wake up. And I'm like, what? And I have my sling on and maybe we'll talk about that later, but I had surgery only 2 weeks before. So thankfully I didn't hurt my arm because I might've had to go back into surgery again in Canada if I had hurt myself.
Wow, dude. And then, you wouldn't have been able to come to Mexico. Like that's wild, dude. It's like a beautiful thing that happened when you told me. I'm like, this is a good thing. And we both recognized it. When I was smoking too, I had a rock bottom moment where, God said like God, universe, higher power, Buddha, Jesus, whoever you want to call it. Exactly. He's like, hey man, you've had 9 lives and you're on 8.5. And this is it. And next time you ain't getting away with this one. Because I was like, I was smoking in a public place and some police came and I was in my car. I had a little bowl and a grinder or whatever. Thankfully, I didn't have I was selling at the time. So thankfully I wasn't dumb and brought like a pound of weed or something. But I sprayed the osium spray, which helps with the smell. So the cop comes, he's like, hey man, you can't be here. I'm going to write you a warning because he didn't smell the weed. He hands me the ticket. He turns to walk away. And this is after like 15 minutes of him going to his car and writing the ticket. He goes, is that weed? Just like, no way. Like he was literally about to leave. And it was in that moment where I realized like, okay, I'm not getting away anymore. And that's when I quit too. So, rock bottom, guys, if you're watching and you're having maybe a rock bottom moment or you think one is approaching, like the sooner you can stop, you might not have to experience that if you can, learn the lesson. Now, Ricky, do you think, go ahead.
Well, it's just interesting. It wasn't my first rock bottom though. I think I told you this. I was in Nosara, Costa Rica during COVID. And one day I was driving my motorcycle and I just bought this cheap motorcycle for like $300. And when I bought it, the back tire was completely bald. And multiple people had told me like, you better change that tire because it rains in Costa Rica regularly. And I was in Nosara, it rains regularly. And they're like, that's not going to survive the rain. Like you're going to get an accident. So it turns out there was a mechanic right beside where I was living. And so I pull in the mechanic, I get it priced to switch the tire. They said $10 for the price of the tire and to switch it. And they're like, we can do it right now. We'll do it right now for you. But I wanted to go home and smoke weed. So I'm like, no, we'll do it later. And so as I'm pulling off the road, I'm not really paying attention because I'm high and there's a motorcycle coming. So I have to give it gas to fly across the road so the motorcycle doesn't hit me. But then I'm moving right toward a ditch. So then I had to dump the bike. I burnt my leg pretty badly and then had almost $100 in damages, $90 in damages to the bike. So literally, and then that's not even the worst. About a week or two later, my ex and I were at the beach. We were using edibles and we were playing in the waves. and Nosara has some of the biggest waves in the world. And I got caught in a riptide, and I didn't know anything about riptides. So I got caught in a riptide. I was in over my head. I tried to swim against the tide, which you can't do because apparently they're stronger than an Olympic swimmer can even swim. And I lost use of my arms and legs. So I'm stuck in the middle of the ocean. There's waves crashing down over me. I lost use of my arms and legs. I'm starting to drown. So my ex had to swim back into shore. She had to do the backstroke to even get into the shore because it was so powerful. And then as everything's starting to go white, again, I heard that voice of my higher power saying, are you ready to live your purpose now? Because I'm not going to let you out of this water unless you're ready to live your purpose. And so finally a surfer rescued me, pulled me out of the water. I couldn't stand. I couldn't open my eyes. They had to rush me to the hospital. They put me on oxygen, put me on an IV, and I was at the hospital for a few hours. So after that experience, I did quit smoking cannabis for 8 months. But then me and that ex broke up, and I was feeling spiteful. I'm like, well, I only quit for her anyway. So I went back to cannabis, and then I went through these more of these experiences, and then here we are.
Now, you've taught me a little bit about high magic. Something about that seems a little like there's some magic in there, right? Even though they were negative synchronicities. So I think that's a great transition. What is this high magic you talk about, Ricky? That's a crazy story, by the way. I do want to say that's wild.
Thank you. And so high magic, another name for it is holy magic. And I tell myself it's been suppressed and hidden for thousands of years. And when I hear about these miracles in the Bible, or these miracles in Paramahansa Yogananda talks about miracles, and we hear about the prophets and Moses and the Buddha and these spiritual healers and spiritual teachers, and Mahatma Gandhi. I heard a story in Think and Grow Rich how Mahatma Gandhi was able to unify 200 million people, without forcing them to be unified. He did it through passive way. So Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich said, I would call that a miracle. So high magic is it's miracle magic. So it's essentially, in my interpretation, it's unifying my consciousness with the consciousness of a higher power. So technically, all of the major world's religions are rooted in high magic, like Judaism, Christianity, even Islam. They're rooted in high magic practices, except they don't call it magic. They call it religion. But really, meditation, prayer, confession, being of service, donating, these are all high magic practices, even if an individual is not aware of that. The law of attraction is not quite high magic. I was mentored by a magician in 2015 who initiated me into ceremonial high magic, and he taught me about magic. And what I learned was that there are essentially 3 types of magic. There's black magic, gray magic, and white magic, or low, middle, and high magic. So black magic is the magic you hear about in the movies: curses, hexes, putting spells on people. But the idea is that whatever you put out comes back to you. So if you use magic to harm or to force someone else to do something, that will come back in a negative way. Mm-hmm. Middle magic or gray magic is like the secret or the law of attraction. Okay. It's about manifestation. It's about attracting things to me. But with high magic or white magic, it's based on the idea of a subjective reality versus an objective reality. So in an objective reality, you and I are both having this conversation on YouTube right now, and we're living in a world together. In subjective reality, you're in a dream, and you're both the character experiencing the dream, and you're the source of the dream, and I'm a character in your dream. Or another way to put that is, you're playing a video game, you're the player, you're creating your game world, and I'm another character in your game contributing to your game experience.
Okay.
So high magic is essentially learning how to play the game as the player instead of the character. So you remember in the beginning I said, I'm not really Ricky Goodall, that's just the character I'm playing. So in my video game, I'm playing Ricky, but really who I am is this higher self. And in some mystical systems, they call it like the Christ self, or the God self, or the Buddha self, or the higher self. So high magic is basically learning how to surrender to the will of a higher self or a higher power. And the idea is that higher self has a better plan for me than my ego does. So when you hear about ego death, or surrendering the ego or taming the ego, those are, again, all high magic terms, basically.
Yeah. So wow, a lot to unpack there. I mean, I love that definition. That's so cool. It's like I'm thinking of all the ways this plays out in life. And so it seems a little more common, I think, than maybe the magic word kind of infers. I know in recovery groups, right, they say a big part of it is finding a higher power. That's kind of what a huge part of those, recovery groups are about. And then I think too, like I'm thinking like Lord of the Rings, right? Gandalf, white, Gandalf the
White
White. He
magic.
comes
It's
back
white magic.
and
Exactly.
he the perfect. And I think it sounds like to me, both of us had that low magic experience when we hit our rock bottoms, where
Right.
we saw the karmic cause and effect. We do this, we have this. And I think it kind of goes into the middle one too, where we manifested negative things. So it almost seems to me like the middle magic is a bridge between the two. And like that even in the high magic, you're still manifesting, right? Or how do you view those two?
Yeah, yeah. So first of all, I love what you said about the cause and effect and how when we were using cannabis, we were using low magic. Because if I imagine that there's a left-hand path, a right-hand path, and a middle path in terms of spirituality, I would imagine the left-hand path is sometimes associated with like Satanism or like Luciferianism or all these different superstitious words. But what that basically means is chasing pleasure, chasing for the self alone, receiving for the self alone. Far right path is like complete sacrifice, asceticism, living as a monk, not experiencing any pleasure whatsoever, and then or very little pleasure. And then there's the middle path, which is like a perfect balance of the two, really. So I imagine that like Jesus or Buddha or Moses, a lot of these people in history, that they walked the middle path. So when you and I were chasing pleasure, we are experiencing suffering because the universe and our dopamine centers in our brain have to find balance. So, chase short-term pleasure leads to suffering.
Yep.
Right. But if I chase short-term suffering, like I meditate when I wake up in the morning, I go to bed, I shut my phone off 2 hours before bed. I don't eat junk food every single day. If I'm willing to face my suffering intentionally, voluntarily, then I get to experience longer pleasure and more pleasure more often. So white magic or high magic is kind of the idea of sacrificing short-term gratification for long-term satisfaction in my interpretation. So you're right. When we were trying to take chances and we were selling weed, I sold weed too. I told you that, I was crushing it, but there was constantly something wrong in my life. There was always some drama, some relationship problem. My car would break down or, random things would happen. And since I've moved more into this, what I imagine to be like a lifestyle of being in alignment with a higher power, being in alignment with a higher will or a higher way of living life, less and less and less suffering happens and the more pleasure happens. And that pleasure seems to be easier and easier. Now I want to say, like, I'm sharing like the philosophy of high magic, and I'm sharing it this way because I want everyone to understand that they're all in a way a magician. Whether they're low, medium, or high is based on their understanding of these laws and their fundamental universal laws. But there is an actual system or systems of high magic too, which include rituals and prayers and different practices that are related to raising consciousness. So, and the simplest way, if you're living in alignment with a higher power, if you're living in alignment with nature, you're kind of practicing high magic. And there's a way to learn it at a deeper level as well.
Man, so many little hits of insight there. It's like, yeah, when you were speaking, what was popping up in the brain were just different ways in my life that I'm still practicing low magic today, and then other ways I'm practicing high magic. And I'm sure you as well have those experiences. Maybe the folks watching you as well. For example, let's just go with like dating, right? Like that can be a low magic activity. It's like trying to get that pleasure, trying to get that dopamine hit, and then what comes after it. And we had a little session about it, suffering, because it's just like not getting that fix. So that's like, I'm really going to think about that deeply here and over the next few days. And like, how can all of these things that are low magic, and that, I guess that's a question for you. How do you transition from low magic to high magic?
Yeah. I mean, I think like they say, the truth will set you free, right? So it's like Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So really it's like, and Carl Jung studied alchemy, which I tell myself is a form of high magic. So is Kabbalah or all these different types of mysticism. So the idea is that my unconscious mind, my unconscious beliefs, my unconscious traumas, they're kind of running the show until I make them conscious and start to heal them. They're kind of running the show for me. So when I chase validation through dating, that's kind of my traumas, usually related to my mother in my case, or with a woman, if she's chasing men, it could be related to her father. or masculine relationships. So it's like, if I don't resolve high magic is essentially about resolving the unresolved pain so that I can be free of the karmic cause and effect that it causes in my life. And I can see where my trauma is playing out in my life, my unprocessed pain, include not just trauma either, including guilt. Like you talked about the 12 steps. I would call the 12 steps one of the most powerful high magic rituals there is.
Oh, wow.
Because it's got sacrifice, because it's got confession, because it's all about service, because it's about prayer and meditation. I tell myself, like, the 5 most powerful practices in high magic are prayer, meditation, confession, service, and sacrifice. And when I say sacrifice, it means letting go of cannabis. That's a sacrifice. You know, it was for you too. We had to let it go. And it's like, as much as I love it, or I tell myself I love it, letting it go leads to a whole other level of freedom that I couldn't possibly have experienced without it. And similarly, I had a deck of tarot cards that I really loved. And a friend was here and she said, "Oh my God, I've been looking for those forever. I haven't been able to find them anywhere. They don't sell them anymore. Wow, you have a deck. Like, what are the chances?" And at the end of our conversations, here you have them. And it was like, oh, it kind of hurt to give them away because I've had them for years, but it was like a form of sacrifice for me, a form of detachment of like, I'm going to let this thing go because it doesn't bring me happiness. What brings me happiness is connection with myself and with others and with my higher power, which is really what the 12 steps is about too. So these different rituals, like the 12 steps and like going to sobriety meetings or attending your community, these are rituals that lead to greater senses of happiness and health and well-being and connection with a higher power and connection with others. So I would call those high magic practices too.
Okay, cool. Well, that's really good to know that, like, you don't have to go do something crazy and like go hang out in a forest for like 3 years to begin practicing. We're doing it every single day. Yeah, just being of service.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So, man, like, so Ricky, give us an update. Like, where are you now? Like, what's going on? How's high magic playing a role in your life?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So again, like when I started high magic, I didn't mention this earlier, but when I was initiated into high magic, we were using plant medicines. We were using psilocybin mushrooms. And my mentor smoked a lot of cannabis back then. We didn't use it in a ceremony, not very often, maybe at the end of the ceremony, but we would use psilocybin mushrooms. And so high magic is a powerful practice without anything. It doesn't require anything else to be powerful. But for a lot of my high magic career in the beginning, I was using substances. So I didn't really get to experience how powerful it was without them for a lot of that time, because I was constantly, same with meditation. It's like when I was initiated into transcendental meditation, they said you have to go without cannabis for 14 days, without alcohol, without cannabis. And I understood why after 14 days, because my meditation was getting really deep and powerful. And it wasn't as powerful before that. So similarly with high magic, these rituals, there are specific rituals. They're based on geometry. They're based on psychological archetypes. They're based on different energy points in the body. And so it's really working with the body's chemistry and the mind's way that the mind is built with psychological archetypes and geometry and things like this. And so what I've been able to do now that I've let cannabis go, and I'm only almost my 30-day mark this coming Tuesday. Yeah, which is great. And again, it's like when I took 8 months off, I didn't feel as good as I feel now. And I think it's because I did maybe we'll tell that story. So the day that you and I started working together, I started a parasite cleanse, and I was gonna stop smoking weed. And I kind of decided that day that I might smoke weed. And I started the parasite cleanse, and I prayed to God, and I said, God, I want you to use these herbs, which are 3 special herbs to kill all the parasites, to cleanse me of all different parasites, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical. So if I have any other things to cleanse me of, please use these herbs for that purpose. And you and I had a conversation. And that night I tore my bicep at kickboxing and found out that I had to go into surgery. So then for the next week, I continued to smoke weed. And then once the surgery happened, I tried to keep smoking weed, but then it was just getting harder. And it was like trying to run through mud. It was like getting harder and harder and harder. So with this sling on, it was really tempting. And I've had it on for almost 6 weeks. I get to take it off on Tuesday. It was really tempting to slip into a victim mindset and continue to use cannabis. But I was like, no, this doesn't make sense. It's like doing a parasite cleanse. Like, why would I detox my whole body and continue to use cannabis? And it's difficult to eat the food that I'm supposed to be eating when I'm using cannabis, because I want to eat all the other stuff, all the junk food, all the different dopamine releasing foods. So it really made it more difficult. But what I noticed now that I'm hitting almost that 30-day mark is I'm practicing my rituals every day, which I wasn't doing when I was using cannabis. I'm practicing a morning ritual that's pretty consistent. I have an evening ritual now also, which I wasn't doing with cannabis. Well, that's not true. My evening ritual is smoke weed and usually lay in my bed and meditate and spend like 2 hours meditating. But really all I was doing was laying in that high haze. And, it's like, again, I'm grateful for all the experiences I had. I had lots of creativity during those times. I wrote lots of music while I was high. And speaking of which, I'm writing more music now that I'm not high than I was when I was high. And I had this idea that I needed to smoke weed to be creative. I needed to smoke weed to write music. But now I'm doing magic rituals in the morning and in the evening, along with meditation and prayer and breath work, and which are all high magic practices too. And my creativity is through the roof. My optimism and my happiness is through the roof. And even when I face challenges now, I've got this like underlying current of happiness and almost like humor with whatever I'm facing. I'm just like, whereas when I was using cannabis, I also had shame and guilt, this undercurrent of shame and guilt all the time. If something happened in my family, I'd feel the shame and guilt of using cannabis. If I wasn't making the money I wanted to make, if a client didn't say yes to me, if some kind of challenge happened in my life, I would also have that guilt and shame of using cannabis at the same time. And that wasn't always there. When I made the decision to use cannabis and didn't feel guilty and ashamed about it, it wasn't really there. But once I knew that it was time to let go, then that shame and that guilt started becoming more and more amplified, and I couldn't ignore it after a while.
Man, that's powerful. I'm so happy you're experiencing benefits. And it's kind of crazy to me that, Tuesday's your 30-day mark and you get your sling off. Like if that's not symbolic.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like coming full circle. And, guys, this is like, it's really, I think one thing that I really took out of this, Ricky, is that you have motivation now. You're doing the things that you need to do to get better, right? People that smoke weed and quit and then don't do anything about it after, I see that those people have a struggle, finding peace. So the fact that you're doing all those things, right? The meditation, the prayer, all that stuff on a more amplified level, like that's really the key, guys, is you have to start getting into things that are going to, nourish that soul, nourish that creativity, help you unleash that creative potential that maybe has been dormant for a while. I remember, I produced music as well, and I thought I was making God's gift when I was high, man. I'm like, dude, this is like, I'm going to Ultra Miami, dude, to play. And then I would have friends over and they would like hear the song and then they would just be like, they wouldn't even move. It was so bad. And then I got sober and I'm like, this isn't very good. So I think being sober too, it helped me see the truth. And I think you're at a different point of your evolution to where you know how to make music already and stuff. But when I started, I was like, I am really bad at making music. I thought I was like fantastic. So I will say though, that over time, my creativity has just absolutely blossomed as well. Like this whole YouTube channel came from just, hey, it would be fun to make YouTube videos. Like I'll give it a shot. Right. And so, what are some other benefits that you've experienced, Ricky, besides?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the music thing, again, it's like I told you before we started the call that I've had a dream my whole life to be a frontman singer, to like be a singer and to lead people through singing. And my dad sang and played music, but he played and performed lots when he was younger, but he never really had the courage to go for it. And I've always wanted to go for it. My brother too, and he's a great musician. He's also in recovery now too. And since I stopped smoking cannabis, my voice has expanded where I have greater lung capacity, which is vital for singing. You gotta be able to breathe well to sing. And my throat's not hurting all the time from smoking weed. So it's like I'm able to sing in a way I've never been able to sing before. So I'm actually discovering this talent that I never really knew I had. But I dreamed that I had it, but I never really knew I had it. And another thing I want to say is like you suggested some supplements, and I was moving in the direction of some of those supplements anyway. And our body has a pharmacy inside of it. Breath work, I get really high from breath work. Cold therapy as well. I haven't been able to do cold therapy or really any exercise since this sling has been on, except for walking. It's the only thing I'm allowed to do. So there's a whole other level of high that I'm going to get to next week when I can go back to the gym and go back to the cold therapy, do cold plunges and things like this. So doing like cold therapy and breath work and exercise and supplementation, there's a whole other level of getting high available to me without that drop. Another sober coach I know, I told you this already, but another sober coach I know said that when we smoke weed, we pay twice, because we pay for the weed and then we pay with the hangover. But when we do things like meditation, we pay once. We put the effort in and then we get the high afterwards. Exercise works the same way, or cold plunge or breath work. It's like the effort I put in on the front end becomes the benefit on the back end. Whereas with cannabis, there's effort on the front end and effort on the back end, because I got to pick myself up the next day and try to go on with work, or in my case, just get high again, because I'm constantly trying to catch up from the dopamine dump and the poor sleep. And it's like my dreams are wild lately, which you and I talked about the REM sleep, trying to catch up, the brain's trying to catch up to not being able to dream for a long time. My dreams are wild lately, and my sleep is not that great either because of the parasite cleanse, but I'm still way more rested than I was when I was smoking weed. Significantly more rested.
God, yeah, sleep is so important, and I like that you pay twice, right? Even with sleep, like you stay up, you go out, you spend the money for the cab or whatever for the event, and then so you pay that fee, and then you pay the fee of being hungover the next day because of lack of sleep. And I just love that. Yeah, if you just do the hard thing in the moment, it may be hard in the moment, but the long-term effects will be way worth it. And meditation is something that had really helped me get sober too. I think I started about a few days, honestly, before I quit marijuana. And I think just those first few meditations was enough to make me see more clearly, because the way I see meditation is it helps you see those parts of yourself and those thoughts from an objective view. So the thought that's saying, hey, it's time to go smoke weed. Hey, this is who you are. Weed's a part of your life. You're like, wait a sec. That's not me. That's just a thought. What if I don't listen to it? What if I don't give it any power or attention? And it's like, wait, and then there's this whole nother world that just opens up, like, whoa, I could go do this and this and this and this and have all this joy and freedom that I always actually wanted. So I think meditation is a huge thing to get into. Like I had a meditation this morning and it kicked my day off right. I know that when I don't meditate in the morning, my breathing is very mouth breathing. And if I spend that 15 minutes in the morning before I even start my day, before I look at my phone and I do the nostril breathing, I can always come back to that throughout the day, and I'm much more calm, centered, focused, and I enjoy life more. So I really appreciate that you brought up meditation as like a really high magic activity. I want to ask, like, and I think, we've talked about this behind the scenes, like, what is kind of your plan going forward with high magic and bringing it to the world?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I first started high magic, I was scared to even tell people that I did it. I was scared of being judged and criticized. And when I post something about it on my Facebook, I might have people that have deeply different views kind of calling me out for it. There's a lot of what I imagine to be like propaganda or superstition or fear around what high magic is. The term high magic wasn't actually created until the 1800s by a former Catholic priest. So he was the one that coined the term high magic. So some people think, well, high magic's evil because they say not to practice magic in the Bible. It's like, well, the magic that they're talking about wasn't actually called magic for another 1800 years. So the magic that I imagine they're talking about in the Bible makes sense, which is probably black magic or sorcery is what they call in the Bible. And my understanding is these types of magic are about manipulation. They're about forcing others to do things. They're about putting spells on people and changing their perspectives and changing their reality and trying to manipulate them. So it makes sense that magic would be forbidden. To me, it makes sense at least. But high magic wasn't really called high magic. So when I hear about like the prophets in the Bible, like Elijah or Elisha or Moses threw his staff down, it turned into a snake. He parted the Red Sea as well. It's like with high magic, I'm praying and asking for something and then experiencing it. So it's different than the other types of magic that we hear about in these superstitions in movies. So what I'm doing is I noticed that there is one other guy who's talked about high magic quite a bit. His name's Damien Eccles, and he was wrongly convicted of murder, and he would spend 18 years on death row. They were going to murder him basically in jail, and he spent a lot of that time in solitary confinement. And because he had been practicing magic in his hometown, a kid went missing. And they blamed him and his two friends because him and his two friends all practice magic. I think that's how the story goes. So it turns out he didn't actually do it. And he claims that he used high magic to be able to get off death row and have the right person caught, basically. even though the person was never finally convicted, but they were able to get new evidence that showed that he wasn't actually the person and it was somebody else. And he claims high magic helped him do that. So he's he's the only other real big authority in high magic in the world that I've seen. So he's doing lots of great stuff. He's got lots of great videos on YouTube. If you're interested, I encourage you to check him out. And what he's not doing is something that I'm doing. And what I'm doing is creating digestible, easy to understand content and courses that help somebody get started. And so one that I'm releasing literally today's the new moon, which is, I'm glad we're doing it on this day too. The new moon, it's a solar eclipse. In magic, that's believed to be a powerful time to set new intentions and to set something new into motion. And so I've just released a program called the Path of the Higher Self. So this is a 21-day self-initiation ritual. So it takes an individual through the process of initiating themselves into magic, but it also helps them understand how to heal themselves using magic. Because all of our current scientific, religious, and education systems are built on magic. Chemistry comes from alchemy, which is an ancient form of magic. Physics comes from Kabbalistic and Hermetic theories, which are, again, ancient forms of magic. Psychology, Carl Jung was a psychologist. Sir Isaac Newton, or an alchemist rather. Sir Isaac Newton was also an alchemist. So the founding father of physics and one of the founding fathers of psychology, they were both high magicians. So our entire scientific system is built on high magic. It's just it eventually got to the point where science wants to prove things. And the challenge with magic is that if I don't believe something's going to work, then my intention affects it. Now, quantum science has supported that idea, but science doesn't fully adopt that idea yet. So what that means is if I try to prove that magic works with the intention of proving it doesn't work, then I'm going to prove it doesn't work, because that's how quantum science works. If I'm trying to prove it does work, then quantum science tells me that I'll probably prove it does work. And there are some great books out there about high magic. One's called Supernormal. He doesn't even use the term magic in it. He uses the term mysticism, and he focuses more on yoga. But he talks about all the miracles that these yogis have performed that he studied and tracked the results. And so what I'm doing is kind of making demystifying high magic, so to speak. So in the program that I'm releasing today, The Path to the Higher Self, and I'll put the link in my name here in a moment. In this program, I'm basically helping the individual understand how to heal themselves from all sorts of different types of traumas and unprocessed pain from the past, and helping them understand how it actually applies to life. So again, for example, we talked about it earlier. If you're struggling in your relationships with women, chances are it's unprocessed pain from childhood. If you're struggling in your relationship with money, unprocessed pain from childhood. If you're struggling in your health or your self-esteem or your happiness or your ability to believe in your dreams, unprocessed pain from childhood. It's all basically the same thing. So I kind of help the initiate understand how to be great at magic. I have to kind of imagine I'm playing a video game. That life is like a video game. Reality is not physical like I think it is. It's a holographic simulation. It's like, and again, quantum science kind of supports this idea with the double slit experiment, the Copenhagen interpretation, all these different these theories support this idea. And so when they join this program, they also get a copy of my book, which I sent to you, The Way of the Garden, a hero's journey from the human to the higher self. And again, I break all this stuff down. So I help them understand the psychology of magic and how to apply it to their lives.
Oh, very cool, man. And I want to say your book's fantastic. I've been reading it. So thank you again for sending that. It's a very cool way to look at the world that I think, it's not complex. It's magical, but it's not. It's very practical at the same time. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so guys, definitely like hit Ricky up for any of that. He took me through a session recently on kind of some of that inner child healing and working with kind of some of those wounds from the mother wound, the father wound, all that stuff from the past. And it was really powerful. So, I really recommend taking some time and investigating this for yourself, seeing if, there are some things that are in you that are affecting your life today that it once addressed could maybe provide some freedom. And I will say it's not easy work. So, we talk about this lightly because we've gone through it. However, it can be very scary and difficult to face. So finding someone that has gone through it as well, and that is essentially a safe person, a trustworthy person that can help guide you through that non-judgmentally is going to be really helpful and key to really overcoming it. Giving yourself that permission to be vulnerable with somebody and open up I know that word gets thrown around a lot today, but it's really true. And the more I find I can be vulnerable with myself and people, the more freedom I find within my life and with others. So one question I did have for you, Ricky, about high magic is that, like, all the stuff in the, YouTube and stuff today say, like, you got to go out, you got to make it happen, it's in your hands, right? And
Mhm.
then you have, like, I think it sounds to me like a little bridge where you have like law of attraction, manifest, but even some of that seems like you're still implying your own will to get something in return.
Yeah,
What do you
yeah, yeah. Thanks for asking that. And there's a question in the comment section I'll get to in a minute about Gabor
Mhm.
Mate. I actually wrote about him in my book. So with high magic, it's like there are some important things like intention is everything. So if I want to manifest money and I think I'm just going to sit home and meditate and money is going to show up, maybe if I have a strong enough will, maybe that will happen. I think everything's possible, but it'll happen even quicker if I go out and take action. Same with law of attraction. It's like if I want to manifest a soulmate partner, but I'm not talking to women, well, I'm making it harder. The universe is going to do so much for me. And with high magic, I might be able to really accelerate that process, speed it up even more. But if I don't get out and do something, if I don't take some action, then it's going to be a slower process, or maybe not at all. And so
Mm.
that's an important aspect of high magic is that I use magic to really, I mean, neuro linguistic programming is a form of high magic. In my interpretation, self hypnosis is a form of high magic, or auto suggestion, which we hear about in Think and Grow Rich. These are forms of high magic, in my interpretation, because they're about changing the subconscious mind. So because up to 95% of my decisions every day are unconscious, and they're rooted in my core beliefs, which I started forming in childhood. Which the person asked about Dr. Gabor Mate. I said, yeah, Dr. Gabor Mate tells us we're born with two fundamental needs: the need to be accepted and the need to be authentic. So, in other words, the need to belong and be loved, and the need to be myself. But at some point in my early childhood, like for example, if I'm crying and my mother doesn't pick me up right away, if I'm being authentic and I feel rejected for being authentic, I may sacrifice my authenticity for acceptance. And that's when I start the pattern of sacrificing my true authentic self so that I can be someone else to get love, which I
Mm.
mentioned at the beginning of our call. So what I've done with the path to the higher self, again, the link is in under my name there. You can pick it up there. Not only am I teaching all of this stuff about childhood programming and how to change it and how it works and how it affects our life, but I'm also putting you in a community of other people who are going through this as well. So we have regular calls, we have biweekly calls, we have a WhatsApp group, a private WhatsApp group with all the members where they connect with each other. Because
Cool.
again, when I was going through this journey, I was by myself. I
Yeah.
didn't have anyone else except for my mentor, and then he eventually moved away. So I didn't have anyone that I could connect with, that I could talk to about this stuff. And it was really difficult for me to believe it. Aristotle said the mind has a mechanism of self-contradiction. So that means that I could experience a miracle in this moment, but in time it's going to start to fade away and I might even forget it altogether. So I really have to keep the magic alive in
Okay.
me through community, and through, which is why you have your community, right? It's like sobriety is difficult when you're by yourself, but when you're in a community, once I connected with you and you and I continued to talk to each other regularly, sobriety became really easy after that. Because before that, I am the average of the 5 people I spend the most time around, and I was surrounded by people who smoke weed. I
Uh-huh.
didn't have anyone outside of that circle who was sober. And then once I met you and you're living a sober life and you're thriving, you're in Mexico now too. We're living the lives that a lot of people in my life used to dream of, and now I'm living that life, and so are you. So once I saw that, okay, if Joel can do it, I can do it. And so similarly with magic, when I hear other people's success stories, I think, okay, well, if they can do it, I can do it too. And so that's a big part of the community is really bringing people together and creating a movement of people that are doing this work.
Your community is so important, right? And they talk about it in the 12 steps. They talk about service, or recovery groups. They talk about service, higher power, and community. And it's like
Yeah,
those three that
yeah,
make the pillar, the triangle.
that's it.
Because, yep, you need it. And like, I'm so happy I met you, because now I feel like I have a new community already forming, and you're a part of that. And it does something. You might notice it very intensely in the beginning, and then over time it may fade a little bit. That's what I found for myself anyway. And then I'm just like, wait a sec, I can go to any of these guys and ask any question, and one of them is going to have an answer, and then at the same time I can give those answers as well. And it elevates you on a level that is It's really hard to describe. And, I think a good example is if you've ever been on a sports team and you've ever, had success there. Maybe you've had a group of friends, right? Right. Like, we're meant to be with people. Like, and what's special about today is, yeah, you can connect with people all over the world. We're here in Mexico City, or I'm in Mexico City, you're in Tulum. It's just like, and we're having this amazing conversation. So I really like too how you put that the truth of what they're talking about on the internet is you have to take action.
Mhm.
And something very kind of very important in that, I'm thinking about what you were saying too about, that childhood trauma. And let's see, Elusive here he talked about childhood trauma and how it leads to things like addiction, not just drugs, but work. A memory came up for me when I was a little kid, and I wanted to go to a birthday party with some really close friends in school. Like, I wasn't like super popular. I wasn't good at sports. So I had my friends and we would just play video games and do stuff. And my mom didn't like those kids. She, judged them, thought they were lesser because they came from poorer families. And I wasn't allowed to go. And it was just devastating. And so I think ever since then, I've had this idea of ever there's something I really want to do in life, I should put work first, and I should put, pleasing whoever the authority figure is in the situation. And so I really appreciate Luce, of you asking this question because, or posing this comment, because it unlocked something for me. And this is like just another example of community, right? You're just
Mhm.
talking stuff, and next thing you know, somebody says something that might shift the direction of your life, even if it's just a phrase. So that, yeah, guys, I really recommend going and hitting up Ricky, checking out the community. Can you give some more, like, just once again, just a detailed example of how to connect with you and all that?
Yeah, exactly. So the easiest way is through this program. So again, the link's under my name there. It's rickygoodall.com/higher self. It's $49 right now.
Oh,
I
beautiful.
mean, I've spent like hundreds of thousands of dollars literally learning this stuff and going through coaching, going through healing, traveling to Mexico and Peru and Costa Rica and training under different healers and being initiated in different lineages. So basically what this program is going to give you is a 21-day process of high magic rituals, disciplines and practices. It's teaching multiple types of breath work that can literally stimulate DMT in the brain, natural psychedelic compounds in the nervous system in the brain. There are different rituals that you're going to learn. There are different self-healing exercises that help you go through all of these processes. And if you join the WhatsApp community, you can even connect with other members and work with somebody in the community for free. They hold space for you. You might hold space for them and work with other people in the community. And that's all part of it. Like, I'm checking my phone and it's at the point now where I don't even have to comment in there anymore. People are posting stuff and having their own conversations and communication. And I have a limit to how many people I can bring into the program because WhatsApp only supports, I think it's like 250 people or something like that at
Okay.
this time. And they're expanding. So I'm going to cap it at probably 250 and then change it to something else or move on from there. So $49 is what it's at right now. Again, it's 21 days, but you can take your own time. You don't have to do it in 21 days, but you can do it in as little as 21 days. And then at the end of the program, you get directions where I walk you through the entire process on an MP3 file to set up your own high magic ceremony. So that includes learning how to open a sacred space, learning how to set up an altar, learning how to perform different rituals that raise your consciousness, learning how to connect with your higher power, learning how to understand the sound of your own intuition, your own inner voice, and learning the dimensions of our consciousness, which I've learned some people in the spiritual community have said things like, "Oh, we're fifth dimensional beings," and I always used to think that was woo-woo, just nonsense. But I've actually learned that there's actually some science behind it, and
Mm.
the dimensions are our mental dimension, which is like our beliefs, our thoughts, and our words. There's our emotional dimension, which is our feelings, pain and pleasure. There's our spiritual dimension, which is our faith and our fear, our connection with a higher power or our lack of it. There's our physical dimension, which is my actual physical body. And then there's my consciousness, which encompasses it all. So we really are fifth dimensional beings. We have 5 fingers, we have 5 points, we have our head, our arms, our legs, 5 toes, five fingers, 5 toes. So we're literally fifth dimensional. It's all throughout our body. And so I teach these ancient geometrical symbols. There are 2 specifically, and they're on the cover of my book, and how they're essentially embedded in the fabric of reality, and how all of reality can be broken down into these 2 very basic geometrical symbols that help us understand our consciousness. And again, as Carl Jung said, when you make the unconscious conscious, or until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So the whole point of this program is to help you raise your consciousness and bring the darkness to the light, bring your unconscious to consciousness, to transform your reality from the inside out. Healing happens just by going through the program. It happens automatically. And then if somebody needs deeper support, there's a whole community to support them, including myself. And there are deeper levels we can get to, and your community, of course, too, which again, if anyone's interested in getting sober, that's going to be the easiest way to do so, because being in a community of sober people, just like being in a community of magicians, is going to help somebody get to the next level. When I was a mixed martial arts fighter, I was surrounded by other mixed martial arts fighters. It's the only way I could get great. And similarly, as a musician, now I'm surrounding myself with other musicians. And being in the Sobriety University is another way, being the Sobriety community is another way to make sure I'm surrounding myself with other people who are thriving at higher levels.
Oh, brother. Got me pumped, man. Like, absolutely, guys. Like, and I think if you're trying to get sober and you're going through that process, I think going through Ricky's course here could be very powerful, because, you know, you might see some things, see some objective realities that you have not been aware of that could really help you maybe step into that next step of getting sober, or, you know, finding a different relationship with substances. You know, we've had people on this channel that are able to use occasionally different substances. So it's not like, you know, it's like, okay, you're sober, you're not sober. Boom. It's like, you're going to find what works for you. For me, I have to go completely opposite, because the way my mind works is that if I get a little taste, I'm like full send. And that's something I've accepted, and it's a reality that I'm living in. However, your reality is going to be your reality. And I think going in through this program with Ricky could be a great step for you. And then also, like you said, finding that community. And so, like, as you guys can see on the bottom, like, really have been excited to launch this community in this last week, and it's been awesome. Ricky's a part of it. It's just so cool to wake up every morning and know that there's a group of people that have the same vision, have the same focus, have the same things, very similar things in life that I'm looking forward to, and that I can, you know, be in touch with. We also have recently launched the Men of Now community. So Ricky, you have also been on that channel. It's a men's dating and development channel. So I really invite you guys to check that out as well. I can put a link here shortly to check that out. And basically it's really cool, because it's a combination of not just addiction recovery, but business, it's dating, it's fitness. It's like how to just maximize your life as a man in 2023, when, you know, life is telling you should be a certain way. There's a group of people that are like, you know, I kind of see through this matrix a little bit. It's not quite what, you know, the news is telling me, or X, Y, or Z. And so guys like Ricky are a part of it. And going to be really, really pivotal to become more of a masculine leader in your life, whether it's for your family, whether it's for your community, whether it's for yourself. And I know that myself being surrounded by masculine men, guys that are on their mission, women that are in their feminine and trying to be, you know, work on themselves, be an active participant in their lives, is really changed my life. And it's taking me to a higher level of consciousness. And there's an adjustment period. So we'll say that, like, it's not going to be easy as we've been talking about, but, you know, we're here for you guys and we want the best for you. So, we're going to dive into some comments here before wrapping up, and really appreciate everybody who's tuned in today. We have the homie, I can't pronounce your name, but we've connected on YouTube recently, and he's been reaching out in the comments, and it's great to have you here. And once again, we'd love to have you on the channel for a podcast, just like with Ricky. If that's something you're interested, you can email me at joel@sobrietyuniversity.com, and we can set something up. So really appreciate your engagement. Elusive as well. Don't know you, brother, but because you're elusive, but you seem like a cool dude, and we really appreciate having you as well. And same to Jay Ray. Thank you, brother. Means a lot that you tuned in. Well, we'll dive into this last comment. Must explore our shadow and look at it in the eyes so that we can understand it instead of suppressing it, and eventually be able to incorporate it in constructive ways. Ricky, would you like to touch on that?
Yeah. I mean, that's it. I want to comment on the thing you said about being completely abstinent and from substances. And for me, I'm similarly, it's like cannabis is a no-go for me. This is not even possible. I forgot to tell you this, actually. Maybe I intentionally hid it, but a couple weeks ago, I had 2 glasses of wine. Okay. And it was like, one glass was like, oh, it tastes good. It's kind of nice. And the second one was like, this is too much. And the next day I felt like crap. And I was like, okay, I think my limit for wine might be like that or none. You know, but one thing I do enjoy using is psilocybin mushrooms in a responsible way, in a respectful way. I've I was initiated as a shaman in 2014 in Cusco, Peru. I have a deep respect for plant medicines, and cannabis is a plant medicine, but it's different. Shamans say it's sticky. She sticks to you and she convinces you need her so that you can keep using her. That's according to the shaman. So, and that's the experience I had, and I think you had too. But mushrooms for me, I was going to use mushrooms yesterday, actually, and I decided not to because, again, it's like I want to optimize my dopamine centers. I want to optimize my neurology. I want to get high AF naturally, as naturally as I can. And if something really intense comes up and I feel like mushrooms are going to be valuable for me to kind of dive in and do some really deep trauma healing work, which I think they're really great for, then I might use them again in the future. But right now, it's like I'm listening to what my body needs. And instead of using mushrooms to process the thing that I wanted to process, I just used myself. And I contacted you and I contacted some friends and had some conversations. And the next thing I knew, I was feeling amazing. So I didn't even need to do that. And then the risk with using something like mushrooms is the dump I can feel sometimes the next day, where I feel like, I've got a dump in dopamine, and then I crave junk food. I might crave cannabis. So there's that risk as well. So I encourage people to, again, listen to themselves, like you said earlier. But I think you and I, when it comes to cannabis, it's obvious. It's like, it needs to be abstinence. It's like that one thing that I need to accept that I have to let go of. And I can't see into the future that far. Maybe someday I change my mind, but I went 8 months before, and you changed my life with this comment. I went 8 months. I wasn't feeling good. I thought, well, nothing's ever going to change. I'm going to feel like crap forever. I might as well start using cannabis again. And I did. But then you helped me understand that sometimes it takes up to 2 years before a person starts to feel good. I was like, oh, darn, I didn't take 2 years. I didn't really have evidence to know that I am not going to eventually get there. And I actually feel like I'm kind of there now. But, it's like, again, it's like after 2 years, maybe then I'll have a better idea to look. So in terms of that comment you mentioned about exploring the shadow, it's like, yeah, that's it. That's the secret. It's like, if we can have the courage, like you said earlier, to be vulnerable, it can change everything.
Oh, absolutely, man. And, I don't say this to be negative. It's the truth. It's not easy. And it can be easy at times, and it can be very difficult at times. So, if this is something you're going through, like, you just embrace it full send. There's things today that I'm having to face of my shadow that I really would rather not look at. I know that going through it and finding people that can help me, like Ricky, finding guys through the Men and Now community, through the Sobriety University community, they're helping me get it in a non-judgmental way. And that's really what I find is so important about finding the right group of people, like not people that are just going to rip you to shreds for having feelings or make fun of you or call you stupid or whatever. Like people that are really just going to be like, yeah, dude, I hear you. I'm with you. I've been through it too. And that's something I look to embody in my life too, that non-judgmental attitude. I still have it sometimes, and that's my shadow that I'm working on. And it's going to take some time. And I think finding a mentor too can be very helpful. And to transition out of the stream, we have a stream on the Men of Now podcast this afternoon in a couple hours with my personal mentor. I met him through recovery for work addiction. I was telling him about my dating journey, and he's been on one too. So he's really been helping me kind of navigate that path for me. And we talk maybe once a week, and he's just, I just love talking to him. He's just such a great human being. He's a lot older too. So he's been through the ringer, and he's also, in recovery for a lot of stuff. So guys, check that out on the Man of Now channel. That is going to be a really one. Actually, it's going to be on the Sobriety University channel too. So you can just hang out here for a bit. I'm really excited to talk to him and kind of get his perspective on some things, and to be able to share with you. So that being said, mentorship, again, very important. If that's something you're interested in, I know Ricky and we both do coaching, and we'd be happy to, sit down with you and help you find a way to, overcome some of those demons. And so you can hit us both up on those. Get rid of this one quick. But on my website, Ricky, can they find you for coaching on your website as well?
Yeah, well, not there, but basically my email, let me put it in here. It's just Ricky Goodall. So I'll put it in here. Just one moment here. And there's something else you said that I wanted to touch on before we finish, but I don't recall it right now. But about the vulnerability thing. So I've been through 21 mixed martial arts fights. And if you're somebody who's facing those parts of yourself, if you're facing that darkness, if you're doing that deep work, I can tell you that I've had more men that have fought professionally turn it down out of fear than I've seen actually go in that direction. So if you're willing to do the deep work on yourself, you have more courage than a lot of MMA fighters do, and a lot of people in general. It's like it's challenging. It takes courage, real courage, to cry and release emotions and to face parts of ourselves. But there's so much freedom on the other side of it, beyond anything we can imagine.
I think I would so rather do the healing than get punched in the face.
Exactly. So if you think it's too much, it's like, yeah, it is scary, but it's the best work there is. It's the most important work there is, I think.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. So guys, once again, thank you for coming in. Ricky, thank you for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. And this will not be the last time you see Ricky, and we will be doing much more stuff later. So thank you everyone again for tuning in. Drop your questions below. Reach out if you have any questions, and we'll talk to you soon.